Your addiction is destroying your life, and you don't even recognize it. Unlike substances or gambling, this addiction is socially acceptable, even celebrated. I'm talking about your compulsive consumption of mental junk food. The endless streams of notifications, outrage-inducing headlines, meaningless updates, and algorithmic recommendations that have colonized your consciousness. The withdrawal symptoms when you try to disconnect reveal the truth. You've surrendered control of your most valuable possession, your attention, to forces that profit from your distraction and outrage. How much longer will you participate in your own exploitation? We've all been given a remarkable gift, my friends, the gift of choice. Every single day, you and I make thousands of choices, though we're barely conscious of most of them. But I want to talk with you today about something more profound than everyday decisions. When was the last time you genuinely examined what you allow into your life? The most valuable currency we possess isn't money, it's attention. Where you place your attention determines the quality of your existence. Yet most of us squander this precious resource without a second thought. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to remember negative experiences? A single harsh comment can stay with us for years while dozens of compliments fade from memory. That's because our minds naturally gravitate toward the negative. It's an ancient survival mechanism that's now working against us. In this modern world of endless stimulation, where notifications ping constantly and bad news streams 24 hours a day, many of us have surrendered our most precious possession, our attention, to forces that don't serve our highest. I recently encountered a woman who shared something that shook me. For years, she started each morning by checking her phone, scrolling through social media, and watching the news. I was poisoning my mind before my feet even hit the floor, and I couldn't figure out why I felt anxious and disconnected all day long. The truth hit her during a power outage that lasted 3 days. Cut off from her usual digital diet, she experienced something remarkable, a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. It was like I'd been living with a constant background noise that suddenly went silent, she said. When you force yourself to be more selective about what you allow into your consciousness, something miraculous happens. The mental fog begins to lift. Clarity emerges. Possibilities that were always there, but hidden behind the noise, reveal the... I wonder how many of us realize that we're participating in our own suffering by continuing to consume what depletes us. The colleague who always complains, the friend whose drama never ends, the media that profits from outrage. We keep inviting them in day after day and then wonder why we feel drained. Being selective isn't about building walls. It's about creating healthy boundaries. It's recognizing that your mental space is sacred ground. Would you allow someone to dump trash in your living room? Of course not. Yet we permit countless negative influences to dump their garbage directly into our minds. What would happen if, for just 1 week, you became fiercely protective of what you allowed into your awareness? If you evaluated each input by asking, does this elevate me or diminish me? A man once approached me after a seminar with tears in his eyes. For decades, he'd started each day listening to talk radio that specialized in political outrage. I never realized how angry I'd become, he confessed. My whole worldview had darkened. I was seeing enemies everywhere. His transformation began when he replaced his morning routine with silence, then inspirational reading. Within a month, his relationships improved. His blood pressure dropped. I feel like I've awakened from a trance, he said. I'm the same person, but I'm experiencing a completely different reality. That's the power of selective attention. Your experience isn't created by the world around you. It's created by what you choose to focus on within that world. Think about the people in your life who inspire you. What quality do they share? I found it's almost always a remarkable ability to focus on what's meaningful and filter out distractions. You already know intuitively what nourishes you and what depletes you. The music that lifts your spirit, the books that expand your thinking, the conversations that energize rather than exhaust. The challenge is developing the awareness and discipline to choose consciously, especially when unconscious habits pull you toward what's familiar rather than what's beneficial. Becoming more selective doesn't require adding complicated practices to your life. It begins with subtraction. Identifying and eliminating what doesn't serve you creates space for what does. Start with your morning. Those first waking moments set the tone for everything that follows. Are you immediately reaching for your phone, exposing yourself to whatever demands, dramas, or disasters happen while you slept? Or are you claiming those precious minutes for yourself, setting an intention, expressing gratitude, or simply breathing consciously? A young father told me he transformed his family's life with one simple change. We used to have the news on during breakfast, he said. Everyone started the day anxious and irritable. Now we play beautiful music or share what we're looking forward to. My children are happier. My marriage is stronger. And it wasn't about adding something new. It was about removing what was poisoning. The most profound changes often begin with the simplest choices. Consider your physical environment. Every object around you either contributes to your well-being or detracts from it. The cluttered desk that subtly signals unfinished business to your subconscious. The inspiring artwork you've stopped seeing because it's become invisible through familiarity. Your surroundings are constantly communicating with you on a level beneath conscious awareness. Becoming selective about your physical space can produce immediate shifts in your mental and emotional state. This principle extends to every aspect of life. The foods you eat either fuel your vitality or deplete it. The activities filling your calendar either align with your deepest values or distract from them. The thoughts you habitually entertain either empower or disempower you. When you commit to becoming more selective, you're reclaiming your authority over your own experience. You're acknowledging that while you can't control every circumstance, you absolutely can control what you give your attention to within those circumstances. I've observed that many people resist this idea because it feels like work. Conscious choice requires effort. Autopilot is easier. But consider the cost of that convenience. A life dictated by external influences and internal conditioning rather than conscious intent. The effort required to become more selective is front-loaded. Like building any muscle, it demands energy initially but becomes stronger and more natural with practice. Eventually, discernment becomes instinct. You develop an internal compass that naturally guides you toward what nourishes and away from what depletes. A business executive once told me that implementing selective attention transformed her leadership. I used to pride myself on multitasking and being available to everyone all the time, she said. I was constantly reactive, constantly open. When she began setting boundaries around her attention, designating time for deep work, limiting email checks, declining non-essential meetings, everything changed. My decision-making improved dramatically. My team became more self-sufficient. And I rediscovered the joy that had drawn me to my field in the first place. Attention is finite. Every yes contains 1,000 implicit no's. When you say yes to the notification, you're saying no to the present moment. When you say yes to the unnecessary meeting, you're saying no to focused work. When you say yes to the toxic relationship, you're saying no to your peace of mind. Becoming selective means becoming intentional about your yeses and nos. I believe each of us has a unique purpose. Gifts we're meant to express in service to others, but those gifts remain dormant when our energy is scattered across too many commitments, too many distractions, too many inputs that don't align with our deepest values. If I became radically selective about where I direct my attention, what might become possible, what creative impulses might emerge, what relationships might deepen, what contributions might I make that are currently buried beneath the noise. There's a profound difference between being busy and being effective. Many of the most accomplished individuals I've encountered maintain remarkable spaciousness in their lives. They're selective not just about what they do, but about when and how they do it. They understand that sustainable achievement flows from focused attention rather than frenetic activity. Being selective means recognizing that not all hours are created equal. There are optimal times for deep work, for connection, for movement, for rest. And these rhythms are unique to you. Honoring your natural cycles rather than fighting against them is another form of discernment that yields tremendous benefits. I've noticed that when people first embrace selectivity, they often experience a period of discomfort. This discomfort has a specific quality. It's the tension between authentic preferences and conditioned responses. For instance, you might discover that social media leaves you feeling depleted. But notice a powerful urge to check it multiple times daily. That urge isn't a true desire. It's a conditioned habit. A physician described his experience with this tension. I realized that watching the news before bed was affecting my sleep and mood, he said. But when I tried to stop, I felt anxious, like I might miss something critical. It took weeks to recognize that anxiety as withdrawal from a pattern that wasn't serving me, not a legitimate need for information. Becoming selective often involves refinement rather than radical change. It's about aligning more precisely with your authentic nature, which sometimes means adjusting your approach rather than your overall direction. Of course, there are situations where selectivity isn't immediately possible. Many jobs involve tasks we wouldn't choose. Family responsibilities sometimes require attention regardless of optimal timing. Financial circumstances may temporarily limit options. Even within these constraints, however, the principle of selectivity remains powerful. You can choose your attitude toward necessary tasks. You can create boundaries within existing commitments. You can find pockets of time, however small, that remain. A single mother working 2 jobs shared how she maintained sovereignty over her attention despite limited time. I can't control my schedule, she told me, but I become fiercely protective of my thoughts. During my commute, while cleaning, even in brief moments between responsibilities, I consciously choose what I focus on. That mental discipline has changed everything about how I experience my life. Her testimony reminds us that external circumstances matter far less than our internal relationship to them. Even in situations where options seem limited, the power to direct attention remains available. This brings us to an essential aspect of selectivity. Discernment in relationships. The people you spend time with shape your thinking, influence your choices, and affect your emotional state, often more powerfully than you realize. There's truth in the observation that you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Their habits, perspectives, energy levels, and aspirations gradually influence yours through a kind of osmosis that operates beneath conscious awareness. A relationship coach offered this guideline. Healthy connections expand you. Unhealthy connections contract you. This expansion might come through challenge, support, inspiration, or companionship. The essential quality is that the interaction leaves you more fully yourself rather than diminished. Selectivity in relationships requires courage. The courage to establish boundaries, to sometimes disappoint others, to risk misunderstanding. A university professor shared how this courage transformed her professional life. I was constantly available to colleagues and students, he said. My office door was always open, my phone always on. I prided myself on this accessibility, but it came at a tremendous cost. My research suffered. My teaching became mediocre because I had no time to prepare properly. I was helping everyone with their priorities while neglecting my own. When she began setting office hours, directing non-urgent questions to email, and protecting blocks of time for focused work, the initial response was negative. Some people took it personally, she recalled, but gradually a remarkable thing happened. Students became more self-sufficient. Colleagues began respecting each other's time, and the quality of interaction during my available hours actually improved because I was fully present rather than partially distracted. Her experience illustrates that selectivity serves everyone, not just yourself. When you honor your limits and priorities, you implicitly give others permission to do the same. You model sustainable engagement rather than perpetual availability. This brings us to another dimension of selectivity, discernment in information consumption. We're surrounded by unprecedented access to data, opinions, and analysis, far more than any human mind can process meaningfully without conscious filtering. This information overload creates a state that researchers call continuous partial attention. You're perpetually updated but never fully informed, aware of many developments, but unable to contextualize or integrate them. A digital minimalist described his awakening to this condition. I prided myself on staying informed, he said. I followed dozens of news sources, subscribed to countless newsletters, participated in multiple online communities. But I gradually realized I wasn't building wisdom. I was accumulating fragments. My thinking had become shallow and reactive. I knew many facts but understood very little. His solution was radical selectivity. He identified a few high-quality sources aligned with his deepest interests and values. He established specific times for consumption rather than allowing constant interruption. He prioritized depth over breadth, understanding over awareness. This principle extends beyond information to activities, possessions, commitments, everything that occupies your limited time and attention. In each area, the question remains the same. Does this serve what matters most? The courage to ask this question consistently leads to what I call enlightened minimalism. Not deprivation, but the intentional curation of a life containing only what supports your authentic expression and well-being. This alignment creates a remarkable sense of congruence, what psychologists call internal harmony. When your outer circumstances reflect your inner values, energy that was previously consumed by internal conflict becomes available for creative expression and meaningful contribution. A nonprofit leader described this transformation eloquently. For years, I lived with a gap between my stated priorities and my actual choices, she said. I valued deep community but constantly overcommitted to new projects. I believed in presence but remained perpetually distracted. I advocated sustainability while maintaining an exhausting, as she began aligning her choices with her values, declining good opportunities that weren't aligned with her organization's core mission, establishing tech-free evenings with her family, building margin into her schedule, something unexpected. My effectiveness actually increased, she reported. Projects I committed to received my full attention. Relationships deepened because I was genuinely present. Creative solutions emerged because I had space for reflection. What looked like doing less actually produced more meaningful outcomes. Selective, a universal principle. Selectivity isn't about limitation, but liberation. By consciously choosing what deserves your attention, you reclaim energy wasted on the non-essential and redirect it toward what truly matters. This reclamation often begins with a period-honest assessment. Where are you currently investing your precious attention? What would an objective observer identify as your priorities based not on your statements, but on your calendar, your bank statement, your daily habits? With clarity about current reality, you can begin the practice of conscious choice, developing what philosophers call the examined life. This examination isn't a one-time event, but an ongoing discipline, regularly pausing to question assumptions, evaluate priorities, and realign choices with deepest values. A educator who embraced this discipline shared its impact. I began asking myself a simple question before each commitment. Will this matter in 5 years? That single filter eliminated so much unnecessary stress and distraction. I stopped volunteering for committees that accomplished little. I focused my research on questions I genuinely cared about rather than what might impress colleagues. Teaching became joy again because I approached it with genuine purpose rather than obligation. A hospice nurse told me the most common regret she hears from patients facing death is not having lived according to their own values and priorities. It's rarely about dramatic failures, she observed. It's the slow drift away from what matters most. Relationships neglected for work that proved meaningless, creative gifts unexpressed because of fear, authentic paths abandoned for security or approval. Her observation reminds us what's ultimately at stake in becoming selective. This isn't about optimization or efficiency, it's about aligning with your deepest truth while time remains available. The practice of selectivity ultimately leads to what psychologists call self-authorship, the conscious creation of a life that expresses your unique gifts and values rather than conforming to external expectations or internal conditions. This centered awareness develops through consistent practice. Each time you pause before responding to a request, each time you question an automatic reaction, each time you align a choice with deeper values rather than immediate impulse, you strengthen your capacity for conscious living. A meditation teacher offered a beautiful metaphor for this development. Imagine your attention as a flashlight, she suggested. Initially, it's weak and easily directed by whatever appears brightest in your environment. As you practice selectivity, the beam grows stronger. You gain the ability to illuminate what truly matters rather than being constantly distracted by whatever happens to cross your field of vision. This strengthened attention creates the foundation for a life characterized by purpose rather than reactivity, meaning rather than distraction, depth rather than fragmentation. It enables what philosophers call vertical development, not just acquiring more knowledge and skills, but developing greater wisdom in how you apply them. A leadership consultant who works with executives at pivotal career stages shared how this vertical development transforms organizations. The most effective leaders I encounter aren't necessarily the most knowledgeable or skilled, he observed. They're the most centered, able to remain grounded in essential priorities amid constant pressure and distraction. This centeredness creates a field effect that elevates everyone around them. His observation points to the ripple effects of personal selectivity. When you become more intentional about what you allow into your awareness, more discerning about where you invest your energy, more aligned with your authentic nature, you create possibilities not just for yourself, but for everyone you influence. A teacher who transformed her relationship with technology described these ripple effects in her classroom. When I stopped checking my phone during breaks and transitions, she said, I noticed my students gradually doing the same. Our conversations deepened. Eye contact returned. The classroom environment shifted from fragmented attention to genuine engagement, not through rules, but through modeling. Her experience illustrates the contagious nature of presence. In a world increasingly characterized by distraction, the quality of your attention becomes a gift to everyone you encounter. A palliative care physician who sits with people in their final days shared a profound observation about this discernment. As death approaches, he told me, extraordinary clarity emerges about what truly matters. The artificial falls away. What remains is remarkably consistent across different backgrounds and beliefs: connection to loved ones, expression of authentic gifts, reconciliation of relations, and contribution to something beyond oneself. His observation offers a powerful lens for developing selectivity while time remains abundant. These universal priorities, connection, authenticity, reconciliation, contribution, provide orientation points for discerning what deserves your precious attention. A community organizer described how this clarity transformed her effectiveness. I used to say yes to every worthy cause, she recalled. The result was perpetual exhaustion and mediocre impact across too many initiatives. When I finally acknowledged my limited bandwidth and aligned my commitments with my specific gifts and deepest values, everything changed. My contribution became more focused but far more effective. The causes I declined found champions better suited to their needs. Everyone benefited from this honesty about capacity and calling. This perspective shifts selectivity from self-centered to life-centered. The question becomes, not what do I prefer, but how can my limited energy and attention create the greatest benefit, not what feels comfortable, but what allows my authentic gifts to serve most effectively. A social entrepreneur who works with underserved communities offered a powerful framing of this shift. I used to think self-care and service were opposing values, he said. Taking time for renewal felt selfish when needs were so urgent. I pushed beyond my limits until burnout forced me to stop entirely. Now I understand that sustainability isn't selfish. It's essential for lasting impact. By becoming selective about how and when I serve, I become more effective over time, not less. The journey toward greater selectivity isn't always comfortable. It requires facing the discomfort of changing habitual patterns, setting boundaries that may disappoint others, and sometimes standing alone in choices that contradict cultural norms. Yet those who undertake this journey consistently report a profound sense of coming home to themselves, a recognition that they're finally living from their center rather than their periphery. The invitation before you now is simple but profound. Begin where you are, with one area where greater selectivity would serve your well-being and authentic expression. Perhaps it's your morning routine, your information diet, a relationship pattern, or your approach to commit. Start small with awareness rather than dramatic change. Notice what's currently receiving your attention and ask whether it truly deserves this precious resource. As you develop this awareness, remember that the goal isn't perfection but alignment. Gradually bringing your choices into greater harmony with your authentic nature and deepest values. This alignment creates not just personal well-being but expanded capacity to serve what matters most to you. The choice is yours in each moment. Will you allow your precious attention to be captured by whatever shouts loudest, or will you consciously direct it toward what genuinely deserves this sacred resource? The quality of your experience and your contribution to our shared world flows from how you answer this question, moment by moment, choice by choice, day by day. Choose wisely, my friends. Your attention creates your reality. What would happen if for just 1 week, you became fiercely protective of what you allowed into your awareness? If you evaluated each input by asking, does this elevate me or diminish me? I've seen this simple practice transform lives. A corporate executive who stopped beginning her day with email and news reported that her anxiety decreased by half within days. A teacher who implemented tech-free evenings found his creative thinking flourish. A mother who filtered her social media connections to include only those who inspired her discovered renewed energy for her children. That's the power of selective attention. Your experience isn't created by the world around you. It's created by what you choose to focus on within that world. Think about the people in your life who truly inspire you. I guarantee they share one quality, the ability to distinguish between the essential and the non-essential. They focus intensely on what matters and filter out everything else. This isn't just a productivity hack. It's a fundamental life orientation. You already know intuitively what nourishes you and what depletes you. The music that lifts your spirit, the books that expand your thinking, the conversations that energize rather than exhaust. The challenge is developing the awareness and discipline to choose consciously, especially when unconscious habits pull you toward what's familiar rather than what's beneficial. Becoming more selective doesn't require adding complicated practices to your life. It begins with subtraction. Identifying and eliminating what doesn't serve you creates space for what does. Start with your morning. Those first waking moments set the tone for everything that follows. Are you immediately reaching for your phone, exposing yourself to whatever demands, dramas, or disasters happened while you slept? Are you claiming those precious minutes for yourself, setting an intention, expressing gratitude, or simply breathing consciously? A young father told me he transformed his family's life with one simple change. We used to have the news on during breakfast, he said. Everyone started the day anxious and irritable. Now we play beautiful music or share what we're looking forward to. My children are happier. My marriage is stronger. And it wasn't about adding something new. It was about removing what was poisoning our mornings. The most profound changes often begin with the simplest choices. Consider your physical environment. Every object around you either contributes to your well-being or detracts from it. Your surroundings are constantly communicating with you on a level beneath conscious awareness. This principle extends to every aspect of life. The foods you eat, the activities filling your calendar, the thoughts you habitually entertain. When you commit to becoming more selective, you're reclaiming your authority over your own experience. You're acknowledging that while you can't control every circumstance, you absolutely can control what you give your attention to within those circumstances.